Alex Van Pelt talking about Drake Maye. What did you hear from the Patriots OC when he was asked about the timeline for the Patriots' number 3 overall pick?
Well, I first off, I appreciate the plug. But essentially what it was is he kind of didn't answer the question. Not a huge surprise when you hear, Elliott Wolf and Drake Maye kind of said a lot of the same things as those guys. And essentially the answer is, I don't know. The answer, pretty much he's not going to come out and say, yeah, Drake's going to be in week 4. Drake's going to be in week 6. It's just, that was never going to be how it played out. So essentially what he said is just, it's more of a feel thing. And when we feel like he's ready, when we feel like he's, stacking days together, stacking reps together, that sort of thing, then he'll elevate up the depth chart. And it was a little funny that he said that, I don't know, half hour before practice, because a half hour later, it went from Drake Maye being the number 3 to Drake Maye's being the number 2. And at the time, it was more of like essentially when Van Pelt was asked the question, it was like, when is Drake Maye going to be the number 2? And he just never came out and said, like, you'll see it in a half hour from now. It was like, when he's ready, but he's clearly ready.
Sean, let me ask you this, because we talk about, first string reps, backup, third string. They're moving this guy around a lot, in terms of first, second, or third string. And then let's also remember there's 3 other quarterbacks competing with this kid. I mean, do you look at this as maybe he's not getting enough reps to truly develop, or do you think this is just kind of normal and this is what it is? You get your reps and you do what you can with what you're given. Because I look at this, a lot of young quarterbacks come in, and I know it's a little unfair to put, being the savior on their backs, but like this guy's splitting all these reps with all these other quarterbacks. I'm like, well, how's he supposed to develop if he's not getting as many reps as possible?
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question. I think so. Gerard was asked it, I believe it was right before the second OTA practice that was open to the media. And he was essentially asked just that, like, are you nervous that Drake is not getting enough reps? And at the time he said no. And so I think, before yesterday, really, when Drake was the third quarterback, I think there was more of an argument about it. And it was really more like, it was just confusing. Why is a quarterback that you just took at number 3, why is he your third string quarterback behind Jacoby Brissett and Bailey Zappi? Now, that's changed. And, so he was behind only Brissett yesterday. He was in front of Zappi, and Joe Milton was back, and Joe Milton was riding 4 as well, like he was the first practice. So I'm not too concerned about the reps thing now. I think the way that Gerard said a few weeks ago about kind of, entering training camp, the roster is going to be pared down, the quarterback group is going to be pared down. I think makes sense. At that point, if if you have 4 quarterbacks going into training camp and deep into training camp, I don't think that's the best way to do it. But at this point, I don't think it's a huge concern. So I actually wrote it down in one of the stories. It was Brissett had 25 reps yesterday and Drake had 14. So he saw enough. I think when it comes down to training camp, if you can get it down to 3 quarterbacks and then, he's seeing more of those. And also there's times where during training camp, and it was actually the case last week as well, that they were able to, they had 3 quarterbacks and they had 2 on one field and 1 on the other. So if you're in that kind of situation, I guess, and you can give all of the, whatever it was, 7 on 7 or all the 11 on 11 on one field, if you can give all that to Drake, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it gets him more reps at the time. So I do think I think it is important to go from 4 to 3 going into training camp.
You've seen Drake Maye from the start of rookie minicamp, now through OTAs. Yes, next week minicamp, and then training camp will eventually kick off. But what have you seen as far as progress for Maye? It's important he's getting those more reps, because I agree. Why is he taking number 3 starter reps or backup reps, right? Get him number 2. Get him the second most. So get Jacoby's a guy week 1. Get Drake Maye as many reps as possible in 7 and 7 and 11 on 11s. But what have you seen from him as far as progress being made for his development?
Yeah, I mean, and Alex Van Pelt talked about this yesterday as well. You can tell like the footwork is coming along. And I know that was like a huge, that was a big thing kind of coming in, pre-draft and right after the draft as well. That was really a criticism of his. And I remember hearing Brian Hoyer on a podcast say pretty much it's easy to solve. And then I actually talked to Drake Maye's college coordinator, Chip Lindsey at North Carolina, and he said the same thing. He's like, I think that Drake Maye will be fine. He'll be able to figure out the footwork when the time comes. And I do think you've kind of seen some of that. And, that was one of the things that Alex Van Pelt just stressed yesterday. He said, it's almost, I think the word was, it surprised him. It surprised him to see how, quickly Drake Maye has come along when it comes to the footwork. And another thing he talked about was, controlling the huddle and, calling plays in the huddle. So I would say that those, and Drake mentioned that as well, how, that's another area that he's looking to come along and looking to develop some. So I would say the footwork is certainly something, the accuracy I think is, he had 2 interceptions yesterday. So maybe, that has a little bit of progress. He's still got some ways to go with that. And, everyone you talk to, Gerard or Van Pelt, all those guys are all talking about how pretty much their most important thing is the decision making. So that's another thing that they've really stressed. And, based on at least one of the picks yesterday, it wasn't a great decision that he threw it. So I would say he's got a little ways to go with that as well. But again, those are all, he's 2 weeks in, so those are all things that are going to come. But I do think that you've seen some progress in a few of the areas.
S-Mac, I want to ask you this from your perspective that you've seen. You knew it was coming. That from your perspective that you've seen with Thine Eyes, but also what you're hearing. Talk to me about Joe Milton's development. Because, look, all this Drake Maye stuff is cool. I'm with it. I understand. Number 3 pick overall. I get it. But every time I see a video of this guy, Joe Milton, I mean, he looks like an action figure. He's got a rocket launcher arm. I mean, what's up with the development of him? I'm not saying Drake Maye isn't great, and I'm looking forward to the Drake Maye era. I want to get to it ASAP Rocky, okay? I don't want to wait. But at the same time, I'm curious to know the development of this athletic freak that the Patriots have at quarterback in Joe Milton. What are you hearing and what are you seeing?
So second open practice last week, Joe Milton wasn't there. It was only the Brissett and Zappi and Drake Maye. Yesterday, Joe Milton was back, but he did not see any reps in the final team period of 11-on-11. So I don't know. It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to tell. He hasn't, you haven't seen him in a little while, that sort of thing. And so yesterday it was Gerard was kind of asked the same thing. First impressions. What have you seen from him? How have you seen him develop? And the first thing he said is, like everyone, he has a cannon for an arm. Yeah. But he really stressed the decision making and how Joe Milton has a little ways to go with that. So I would say that I don't think the Patriots are going to cut Joe Milton. I do think, as I mentioned last time when I was on with you guys, I do think it's going to be Bailey Zappi who is the one out. Yep. But in terms of, until he gets more reps in the 7-on-7s, in the 11-on-11s, it's kind of hard to tell at this point. And I mean, the arm talent is crazy. So if you're asking me for one thing, I would say that certainly jumps off the page. It's very obvious. He was saying yesterday how he can throw the ball, 70 yards or 75 yards. And you can see it. But in terms of like the real development, I would say he's still got a little ways to go with that.